Hello everyone, my name is the Storyteller, and today I will share with you some horror stories to help you fall asleep. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. But before that, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss upcoming horror stories. Emily and her friends were supposed to spend the weekend hiking, but when she didn't return home, police found her car abandoned near an old dirt road that led deep into the woods. The last text she had sent read only, "Saw a cabin, going to check it out." Then nothing. The cabin was far from the main trails, nearly swallowed by the forest. From the outside it looked old but lived in, curtains drawn, smoke faintly rising from the chimney. But locals whispered that no one had lived there for decades. Detective Ryan Cole felt the air tighten around his chest. Something was wrong. Inside, the cabin smelled of iron and rot. The floor creaked with every step. Animal bones hung from strings, clattering when touched. In the basement, Ryan found claw marks on the walls, not from animals, from fingernails. People had been trapped here. The killer struck again. Another hiker vanished, and a bloodied shoe was found just yards from the cabin. Each disappearance followed the same pattern. Young adults lured off the main trail, their last traces leading straight to the same cabin. Ryan whispered, "He's not just killing, he's keeping them." Against all odds, a survivor was found, a woman named Claire who had escaped after weeks of captivity. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "He keeps us in cages, makes us watch while he does things. He wears a mask made of bark and antlers, calls himself the Collector." Ryan's stomach dropped. The cabin wasn't just a hideout, it was a hunting ground. Ryan and his partner, Detective Miller, returned to the woods with a search team. They marked trails with bright tape, sweeping every inch. But the forest played tricks. Shadows moved where no one stood, and voices seemed to whisper through the pines. Then they found it, a length of rope dangling from a branch, stained dark red. Not animal blood. In the evidence room, Ryan examined the mask Claire had described. It was carved from tree bark, bound with twine, with real deer antlers sprouting from the top. The inside was lined with dried blood, as though the killer wore it for hours. The strangest part was the carvings on the bark, symbols that looked older than the town itself. The Collector wasn't just hiding, he was performing a ritual. Claire revealed something else before breaking down in tears. "He filmed us." Sure enough, hidden under the cabin's floorboards, police recovered dusty VHS tapes. Ryan played one, the screen flickered, a woman sobbed chained to a chair. A deep voice off-camera whispered, "Your fear is my collection." That night Ryan dreamt of the cabin, of being inside, watching from the cage. But when he woke, his phone buzzed. Another disappearance. A boy no older than 16 vanished from the very edge of the woods. Ryan clenched his fists. The Collector wasn't slowing down, he was accelerating. Despite warnings, Ryan and Miller entered the cabin again, this time at night. The woods swallowed their flashlight beams, and every branch snapped like a footstep behind them. Inside, the air was colder than before. And carved into the wall, fresh and wet, was a single message. "Detective Cole, you're next." Deeper into the basement, Ryan and Miller discovered cages welded into the stone walls. The smell of rotting flesh clung to the air. Dried blood painted the floor in streaks, some smeared as if bodies had been dragged. In one cage, Ryan spotted fresh claw marks and a torn scrap of fabric. The missing boy had been here recently. On their way out, the forest seemed alive. Ryan swore he heard voices drifting between the trees, pleading voices, crying out names of the missing. Miller shook his head. "It's in your head, Cole, just the wind." But when they returned to the trail, the bright orange markers the team had set earlier were gone. Someone or something was moving them. They met with Claire again, the only survivor. Her hands shook as she held a cup of coffee, her eyes darting at every shadow. "You don't understand," she whispered. "He doesn't just take people. The woods help him. The cabin feeds him. Every scream, every drop of blood, it's what keeps him here." Ryan frowned. "Are you saying he isn't human?" She didn't answer, she just cried. That night, Ryan returned to his motel room and found a package waiting at the door. No return address. Inside was a VHS tape. He played it, stomach churning. The screen flickered to reveal himself. Detective Ryan Cole, sleeping in his motel bed, filmed from the corner of the room. A deep voice whispered over the static, "You're already mine." The town was in panic. Posters for the missing papered every lamppost. Search teams doubled, helicopters scoured the forest, and yet the disappearances continued. A couple hiking near the lake vanished without a sound. Only their dog returned, limping with half its fur soaked in blood. Ryan felt the noose tightening. The collector wasn't hiding anymore. He was taunting them. Ryan refused to wait for another victim. Against protocol, he entered the woods alone, pistol at his side, flashlight cutting through the mist. The cabin stood silent, as if it had been expecting him. Inside, the cages were empty, the smell of rot replaced by something worse, sweet, almost sugary. On the table sat a heart, freshly cut, still beating. From the corner of his eye, Ryan saw movement. The collector stepped from the shadows, towering, his bark mask catching the dim light, antlers stretching like claws. Ryan raised his gun, but the killer didn't move. He only tilted his head, studying him. Then, in a guttural rasp, "You came to me." Ryan fired, the shot splintering the wooden wall. The collector moved with impossible speed, vanishing into the dark of the basement. Ryan followed, his flashlight shaking, every breath loud in the silence. Cages lined the walls, some rattling even though they were empty. Then the light cut out, and in the blackness, he heard footsteps circling him. A sudden blow sent Ryan sprawling. His gun clattered across the floor. Chain snapped shut around his wrists. He was dragged into a cage, the iron slamming behind him. From the dark, the killer's whisper slithered through the air. "Now you'll learn what it means to be collected." Ryan struggled, but the chains were tight. The collector lit candles, placing them in a circle on the basement floor. He began chanting in a language Ryan didn't know, his mask casting monstrous shadows against the walls. Ryan realized with horror, it wasn't just about killing. The collector was performing something older, something that required blood and sacrifice. Ryan's flashlight, dim but flickering, revealed more symbols carved into the stone walls of the basement. Circles, eyes, antlers, each one smeared with dried blood. He realized with horror they weren't just decorations, they were tally marks. Each carving represented a victim, hundreds of them. And the wall still had space. The killer stepped close, mask nearly touching the cage bars. "You think I am a man," he rasped, voice distorted. "But men die, I collect what remains." He pressed a bloody hand to the bars. "Fear is eternal, screams echo forever. You will be my finest." Ryan forced himself to meet the hollow eye holes. "You're just a coward hiding in the woods." The collector chuckled, a sound like branches snapping under snow. The killer dragged in something wrapped in a tarp. He pulled it open, revealing the missing boy, barely alive, bound and gagged. His chest rose in shallow breaths, his eyes pleading. The collector raised a blade carved from bone. Ryan's pulse hammered. He slammed his chains against the cage, shouting, "Stop! You don't have to do this." But the boy's muffled screams filled the room as the knife descended. The ritual had begun. Desperation fueled Ryan. He kicked the lantern from the floor, glass shattering, flames licking across the wood. The collector roared in fury, spinning toward him. Smoke filled the basement, but Ryan's hands, bloodied from tearing at the chains, finally slipped free. Grabbing a shard of glass, he stabbed at the lock until it snapped. The cage swung open. Ryan stumbled through the smoke-choked cabin, dragging the boy with him. But the collector was fast, too fast. His footsteps thundered behind them, his mask glowing in the firelight. "You are mine." Ryan burst through the cabin door, lungs burning, forest looming ahead. But he knew he wasn't escaping. He was running straight into the monster's hunting ground. The night swallowed them whole. Ryan dragged the boy, heart pounding, every tree seeming to twist into a face. The forest itself felt alive, the shadows whispering. Behind them, the collector moved with inhuman speed. No matter how far Ryan ran, the crunch of leaves followed, always closer. Then Ryan realized the horrifying truth. The woods weren't just a hiding place. They were guiding him back toward the cabin. Ryan stopped, shoving the boy behind him. He raised his pistol, hands trembling. The collector emerged, antlers scraping the branches, mask gleaming in the moonlight. "You don't belong here," Ryan growled. The killer tilted his head. Neither did they. He gestured to the forest around them, as if the trees themselves were filled with spirits of the lost. For the first time, Ryan felt it, the weight of countless eyes watching from the dark. The collector lunged. Ryan fired, the bullet splintering the mask, cracking it down the middle. The killer staggered, and for a moment, Ryan glimpsed the face beneath, scarred, pale, eyes burning with madness. But when the mask fell to the ground, the forest seemed to scream. Wind howled, branches thrashed, and the earth itself shook. The collector didn't weaken, he grew stronger. Ryan grabbed a broken branch, sharp as a spear. As the killer charged, Ryan thrust it forward, impaling him through the chest. The collector roared, grabbing Ryan by the throat, squeezing until black spots clouded his vision. Then, with one last surge of strength, Ryan shoved deeper. The branch pierced through, pinning the monster to a tree. The collector twitched, his rasp fatting. But his last words chilled Ryan to the bone. "The cabin never dies." The boy sobbed, clutching Ryan's arm as dawn crept through the trees. They left the body impaled, mask shattered on the ground. By the time the rescue team arrived, the woods were silent, safe. Or so it seemed. Weeks later, a new report surfaced, another hiker missing. And deep in the forest, in the smoldering ruins of the cabin, someone had rebuilt the mask. The collector had been only one man, but the cabin had chosen another. The small town of Ashgrove had a curse whispered among parents: "Keep your children indoors after dark." But children never listened. They vanished one by one, leaving shoes in the street, toys dropped in the dirt, and silence where laughter once lived. The police searched endlessly, but there were no bodies, no traces, just gone. Old Mrs. Callahan at the library spoke of it first. "They call it the hollow mouth," she rasped. "It doesn't chase children, it waits, smiling, opens wide, and they walk in on their own." No one believed her, until one boy came running home screaming. He swore he had seen a man in the woods with no eyes, only a mouth stretching so wide it split his head. 8-year-old Sophie was walking home from school when she heard it. A lullaby, soft, sweet, drifting from the trees. She followed the sound, each step heavier, as if her mind wasn't her own. And there among the shadows stood a figure, tall, thin, with a grin that opened and kept opening. Inside that mouth, she swore she saw stars. When Sophie didn't come home, her older brother David searched. He found her backpack near the woods, straps torn, the zipper wet with something dark. Then he heard it, the lullaby. From the corner of his eye, a figure moved between the trees. When it turned, David saw the impossible, a mouth yawning wider than a door, lined with teeth that never ended. And in its throat something moved, small hands reaching out. David ran, but the sound followed him, soft singing that twisted into growls. He burst into town, gasping, screaming about a monster in the woods. No one believed him. But that night when the moon was high, more children wandered from their beds, drawn by the same song. And the town of Ashgrove woke to silence again. David tried to sleep, but the lullaby never left his ears. It echoed faintly in the corners of his room, like it was inside his head. When he covered his ears, the sound grew louder. When he whispered Sophie's name, the song paused, as if listening back. Determined, David returned to the woods. The air was colder here, the trees unnaturally still. He saw carvings on the trunks' mouths, hundreds of them etched into bark, all open wide. As the moonlight shifted, David swore the carvings moved, teeth gnashing as if hungry. Then from deeper within the woods, the lullaby began again. He followed the sound until he reached a clearing. There it was, the hollow mouth. Its body was shadow, its face only a mouth that stretched wider than David's entire house. It bent low to the ground, lips curling. And then one by one, children stepped from the trees, blank-eyed, walking straight toward its gaping maw. David shouted, running forward, but as he neared the hollow, his body froze. The lullaby wrapped around him, heavy, pulling at his thoughts, urging him to step inside. From the creature's throat came whispers, cries, and laughter. He realized with horror that the children weren't gone. They were alive inside it. With every ounce of will, David broke free of the trance and stumbled back, clutching his head. The hollow mouth hissed, a sound like trees splitting apart. Its teeth snapped shut, silencing the cries from within. David fled through the forest, but the song chased him, promising, "You will come back, they always come back." David begged the townspeople to listen. "They're not dead," he shouted. "The monster keeps them inside its mouth." But parents turned away, police dismissed him, and teachers whispered he'd gone mad with grief. Only Mrs. Callahan, the librarian, met his eyes. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she said softly. Mrs. Callahan brought him an old, leather-bound book. Inside were sketches of a creature with a yawning mouth, dated back over 100 years. The hollow takes children when the moon is thin. Their souls sing forever in its throat. "Some say it was once human," she whispered, "a man cursed to hunger for innocence." That night, David woke to find his bedroom window open. On the floor beneath it was a wet handprint, small, childlike, but smeared in black saliva. And when he looked in the mirror, he saw it, a faint mark across his throat, shaped like teeth. The hollow mouth had already touched him. The lullaby grew louder in his mind. Sometimes he caught himself humming it without realizing. Once his mother heard and froze, face pale. "That's the song I used to hear as a child," she whispered. Her eyes filled with tears. "David, I had a brother once. He went missing." David woke in the dead of night to a sound outside. He pulled back the curtain and nearly screamed. The hollow mouth stood in the yard, taller than the house, its jaws slowly opening. Inside its throat, Sophie's hand reached out, fingers trembling. Her muffled voice echoed through the glass. "David, help me." David couldn't ignore it anymore. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and the old journal, he slipped into the woods after midnight. The song was louder now, not from a distance, but inside his skull, guiding him. The deeper he went, the more the trees seemed to lean inward, their trunks shaped like teeth. At the clearing, the hollow waited. It was larger than before, body stretching into shadow, mouth yawning so wide the stars disappeared behind it. Children shuffled forward, glassy-eyed. Sophie was among them. "David," she whispered, voice flat, as if she couldn't truly see him. The lullaby pressed against David's mind, urging him closer. And for a moment, he gave in. His legs carried him forward, step by step, until he stood before the abyss of teeth. Inside, he saw Sophie, reaching from a tunnel of flesh, her face pale but alive. "Come in," she begged. "It's safe in here." David stepped inside. The world shifted. Darkness wrapped around him, wet and suffocating. The walls pulsed like living flesh, dripping with saliva. All around him were children, hundreds pressed into the walls, eyes wide, mouths stitched shut by strands of muscle. Their muffled cries echoed endlessly. And above it all, the hollow whispered, "Now you belong to me." David tore Sophie free from the fleshy wall, pulling her close. He ran, slipping in the slime, but the throat stretched endlessly, twisting, swallowing every path. Behind him, the children's muffled wails rose to screams, their bodies thrashing, as if warning him. No one escapes. And ahead, teeth began to close, sealing them in forever. The flesh walls throbbed with a heartbeat, so strong it rattled David's bones. Every step he took felt like moving through living muscle, walls narrowing and expanding. The hollow's whisper slithered into his mind. "Run, child, run, or join them forever." The children pressed against him as he ran. Though their mouths were sealed, their eyes screamed, dire warnings and directions. David realized they weren't trapped, they were guiding him. The hollow relied on fear, but courage could create openings. Sophie clung to him, her small hand trembling but nodding. Deep inside the cavernous maw, David glimpsed something impossible, a single, massive eye embedded in the roof of the throat. It opened slowly, black as night, and he felt it pierce into his soul. The hollow was sentient, not just a beast, but a predator that thought, planned, and hungrily waited for fear. David remembered the journal mentioning fire. He found a branch, jagged, and struck it against the wall to create sparks. The flames reflected in the eye. The hollow shrieked, a sound of tearing forests and breaking bones, recoiling from its own reflection. This was the key, its fear of itself. Using the distraction, David and Sophie navigated a twisting tunnel, following the children's silent guidance. The throat pulsed, narrowing dangerously, but David forced forward, dragging Sophie through the sticky darkness. Finally, a sliver of moonlight appeared at the end. The hollow shrieked behind them, a promise echoing, "I will always hunger, and I will find you again." The tunnel narrowed to barely enough room for David and Sophie to crawl. Behind them, the hollow mouth's pulsating walls beat faster, trying to crush them. Every inch felt like eternity, and the whispers grew into screams. "Your fear feeds me. Your fear feeds me." David kept moving, clutching Sophie's hand tightly. Just as they neared the exit, a massive jaw slammed down, separating the moonlight from the darkness. David threw himself forward, dragging Sophie beneath the closing teeth. He felt the edge scrape his back, pain searing, but he pushed through. The hollow's shriek echoed, deafening, shaking the forest around them. They burst into the clearing outside. The forest was eerily quiet, moonlight washing over the trees. Sophie collapsed, gasping. David helped her to her feet, scanning the darkness. The hollow mouth lingered at the edge of the trees, massive, grinning, teeth glinting, but it didn't follow. David realized the truth. The creature wasn't bound by the forest. It hunted those who feared it. It didn't need to chase, if terror carried the children to it willingly. He held Sophie close, whispering, "We survived, but it's still out there, waiting for the next lullaby." The sun rose, bathing Ashgrove in light. Parents embraced their children. Police questioned every witness, but David knew the hollow mouth would always be hungry. At the edge of the forest, in shadowed branches, something stirred, an impossibly wide grin forming in the darkness, a soft lullaby drifting through the trees. And in the distance, children could almost hear it calling their names. Ashgrove was safe for now. On the outskirts of Pine Hollow, strange static filled every radio. Farmers reported livestock vanished, their pens left empty, doors swinging open. Sheriff Mark Redding chalked it up to coyotes, until he heard it himself, a low, humming sound rising and falling like it was listening. a teenager, Alex Turner, disappeared while jogging at dusk. His friends claimed they saw him run in fear, but when they called for him, there was no reply. No footprints, no blood, just silence. Local lore whispered of something in the woods, an entity that hunted by sound. Don't make a noise after dark, old Mrs. Hensley warned. It hears everything. Mark laughed it off, until the hum returned, this time inside his own patrol car. Sheriff Redding found a strange residue at the edge of the forest, a black, oily substance that absorbed sound. Animals avoided it. People stepping on it described a sudden deafening ringing in their ears. Something lived here, and it listened. That night, Mark set out to find the source. Every snap of a twig echoed in his ears, magnified unnaturally. Then he heard it, a whisper not spoken, a sound that shouldn't exist, moving closer through the darkness. And when he froze, terrified, the hum dropped to a silence that pressed against his skull. Mark stepped cautiously into the forest, heart hammering. Every sound he made, breathing, shifting his boots, was magnified, echoing unnaturally. Then he heard it, a metallic click, a rustle that didn't belong to any animal. Something was tracking him, following each movement like a predator savoring its prey. A group of teenagers camping near Pine Hollow vanished overnight. All that remained were smoldering tents and the faint hum of the alien's presence. When investigators reviewed audio from nearby cameras, the recordings captured only static and faint, panicked screams that no one could hear with the naked ear. Mark studied the pattern. The creature hunted by sound, completely blind to sight. It struck when the smallest noise occurred. A twig snapping, a muffled cough, even whispers, each one drew it closer. He realized survival required absolute silence, every breath measured, every step calculated. Mark devised a plan. He set up a field with sound traps, crackling radios and speakers broadcasting artificial noise, to lure the creature out. From the shadows, a shape moved. Tall, thin, alien, with translucent skin stretched over elongated limbs. And its mouth, if it could be called that, opened like a black hole, producing the humming that disoriented the mind. Mark froze as the alien stepped into the trap. It stopped, tilting its head, listening. A twig snapped under his foot. The alien reacted instantly, lunging with impossible speed, limbs striking like whips. Mark barely rolled out of the way. The air itself seemed to scream as the alien pounced, destroying the speaker in one strike. By morning, the town was on edge. Children whispered about strange shadows moving silently. Livestock vanished. Even dogs refused to bark. Mark realized the alien's presence made sound itself a weapon. Any noise risked death. The sheriff enforced strict quiet. No radios, no vehicles, no alarms. Townsfolk tiptoed through streets, terrified of waking the predator. Even whispers were punished. People began to go mad from the oppressive silence, hearing phantom hums in their own skulls. Mark studied the creature. It could sense vibrations and frequencies invisible to humans. It hunted in complete darkness, striking with limbs that bent impossibly, swallowing victims whole. Every time it fed, the hum grew louder, echoing across the town like a heartbeat of terror. Mark set up a safe perimeter using sand, foam, and cloth to muffle sound. He ventured into the forest, crawling inch by inch, communicating only through hand signals. Even breathing too loudly made him flinch. He realized surviving meant becoming part of the silence. Mark attempted to lure the alien into a hollow canyon, using recorded noise. But the creature anticipated him. It struck before the trap activated, tearing through the speakers and leaving the canyon echoing with its unnatural hum. A scream, someone else's, cut off midair. Mark realized the alien didn't just hunt by sound. It created fear through sound, driving prey into mistakes. Night came fast in Pine Hollow, dragging the town into silence. Every window was shut, every door locked. Mark moved cautiously through the forest, sensing the alien's hum grow louder, like it was inside his head, listening to his every heartbeat. A scream pierced the quiet. Mark froze, listening. The alien had struck again. He found the body of a local boy, thrown into the trees, bloodless, eyes wide, mouth open as if screaming. The hum lingered, vibrating through his skull. Mark realized the alien didn't just hear. It thrived on fear. The more desperate the human, the easier it could locate them. He forced himself to slow his breath, calm his heartbeat, suppress panic. Survival was now a test of mind as much as body. Mark rigged a soundproof bunker, using foam and sandbags in the middle of the forest. He placed motion-activated sound emitters to lure the alien. This time he wasn't running, he was waiting. The hum approached, low and constant, vibrating the ground. When the alien finally appeared, Mark detonated the trap, engulfing the creature in a temporary cocoon of noise it couldn't process. The alien recoiled, shrieking with a sound that tore through the trees. Mark grabbed a fallen log, swinging with all his might. The creature vanished into the forest, but not before one chilling message echoed in his mind. "Silence is never enough. I will hear you again." Mark realized the battle was far from over. Pine Hollow became a ghost town overnight. Windows were shuttered, doors nailed shut, footsteps were whispers, children were confined to basements. Every resident feared the faintest sound. Even the wind became deadly. Mark discovered the horrifying truth. The alien adapted. It could differentiate between human-made noise and artificial traps. Every plan, every recorded sound made it smarter. It was no longer just hunting, it was studying, waiting for the perfect moment. One night the alien attacked en masse. It tore through houses, listening for the smallest whimper. Families vanished. The only evidence left behind, shattered glass, silent rooms, and its haunting hum. Mark barely escaped, diving through a window. Mark knew he couldn't run forever. He constructed a massive sound chamber in the town's abandoned warehouse, designed to trap the alien in a cacophony it couldn't process. Every wall was layered with speakers blasting random frequencies, a thunderous roar meant to overload the creature's hearing. Mark and a small team baited the alien into the warehouse. It appeared as a thin, humanoid shadow with an enormous, pulsing head. The hum was deafening, disorienting the humans. As the alien entered, the speakers activated. The chamber shook violently. The alien's shrieks filled the building, body convulsing, unable to tolerate the noise. For the first time, it faltered. The alien shrieked, its limbs thrashing violently. The sound chamber amplified every noise, creating feedback that disoriented it completely. Mark watched from behind the reinforced wall, heart pounding, knowing this was the only chance to end it. The alien lunged, but the speaker's vibrations made it stumble. Mark realized it could not tolerate constant, chaotic sound. He shouted instructions to his team. Everyone had to keep producing overlapping noises to trap it further. The creature howled in frustration, its ears, if they could be called that, twisting, trying to locate the source of the chaotic sounds. The warehouse walls shook as the alien shrieks grew louder, piercing every surface. Then, with a final, bone-chilling scream, the creature collapsed in the center of the room, thrashing, convulsing as its auditory system overloaded. Mark and his team cautiously approached, ready to finish it if necessary. The alien lay still, twitching. Mark waited, heart racing, until finally the hum faded completely. The threat was gone, or at least contained. The town of Pine Hollow slowly exhaled, realizing the nightmare was over. Children's laughter returned cautiously, birds sang, and sound once again filled the air. Weeks later, Mark found a faint residue of black oil near the edge of the forest. the same kind the alien had left behind. He shivered, realizing the creature might not be gone forever. A soft hum drifted on the wind, almost imperceptible. And in his mind, a whisper echoed. I will hear you again, and next time silence won't save you. Detective Claire Mason arrived at the crime scene, stomach turning. The victim, a young woman, was found in her apartment, meticulously arranged, red ink smeared across the walls. On the table lay a small notebook, the red ledger. Each page contained a name, a date, and a single word, claimed. Over the next month, more victims appeared, each killed with a ritualistic precision. All were connected by one thread. Their names had appeared in a mysterious ledger delivered anonymously to the police. Claire studied the ledger obsessively, her eyes scanning for the next name, the next target. The killer's signature was clear. No fingerprints, no DNA, just the ledger and the precise timing of murders. Claire noticed a pattern in the dates. Each killing occurred exactly 7 days apart, always on a Tuesday. The city was terrified, and the killer's taunting was relentless. A second ledger appeared at Claire's apartment doorstep. The pages were filled with her colleagues' names. The final page read, "Next is the one who hunts." Her pulse quickened. The hunter had become the hunted. Claire traced subtle hints left by the killer. Unusual symbols carved into walls near each crime scene, numbers scribbled in red ink. She realized the killer wasn't just killing randomly. They were orchestrating a game, one designed specifically to lure her into a trap. The third victim was found in a rundown motel, bound and posed in a grotesque tableau. Red ink streaked across the walls spelled "watched." Claire noticed a faint scent, chemical and metallic, lingering in the air. The killer was leaving a signature only the observant could follow. Claire received an anonymous phone call. A whisper, cold and mocking. "You're next, detective." The line went dead. She looked over her shoulder that night and realized someone had been following her on the way home, silent, unseen, just watching. The red ledger grew. Each new page contained not only names but also cryptic instructions, seemingly predicting where victims would be found. Claire's colleagues began whispering, worried that they were already in the killer's crosshairs. A young man, a witness from a previous scene, vanished in broad daylight. Claire discovered his phone on a park bench, with a video recorded moments before his disappearance. The killer's face, pale and smiling, holding a knife and writing in a small red notebook. The message was clear. The killer was always watching, always planning. Claire traced a trail of overlooked clues, delivery receipts, faint fingerprints on ledgers, and a network of abandoned warehouses. She finally had a location to investigate, but entering meant walking straight into the killer's world. Claire entered the abandoned warehouse, flashlight cutting through thick dust. Every step echoed, amplifying her fear. Red symbols were painted on the walls, matching those from the ledger. Then she heard a whisper behind her. "You shouldn't have come alone." The door slammed shut. Claire spun around, heart racing. Chains clinked, and she realized she wasn't alone. From the shadows, the killer emerged, tall, lean, wearing a black hoodie, notebook clutched tightly. "Detective Mason," he hissed, "I've been waiting." The killer wasn't just there to kill, he wanted a game. He forced Claire to read aloud names from the ledger, each syllable tightening the trap, each breath another risk. The warehouse walls seemed to close in, red ink smearing like blood from the pages themselves. Claire spotted an exit, a small door hidden behind crates. She bolted, knocking over shelves to slow him down. The killer followed, silent but deadly. His notebook dropped, pages fluttering, revealing detailed plans of her apartment and coworkers. Outside, Claire gasped for air. She knew the killer was organized, meticulous, and watching her every move. But she had a new advantage, the notebook. The red ledger wasn't just a list of victims. It contained patterns, times, and routines she could exploit. Claire studied the ledger obsessively. She recreated a pattern of the killer's movements, predicting his next target. This time, she planned to turn the tables, baiting him into a location where she could finally confront him on her terms. The killer struck again, leaving another victim posed with red ink forming the word, "Next." Claire realized the message wasn't just taunting her, it was a countdown. She now understood the killer's obsession: control, planning, and the thrill of manipulating fear. Claire set up cameras and motion sensors across the predicted location. Hours passed, then finally movement, a shadow slipping silently between crates, notebook in hand. The killer's pattern was precise. Every step was measured, every pause calculated. Claire confronted him directly. The killer smiled, calm and unafraid. "Detective Mason, I've been waiting for someone like you." He lunged, but Claire dodged, using her knowledge of the space. The warehouse became a deadly chessboard, with red ink stains as markers of danger. During the struggle, the killer dropped the red ledger. Claire grabbed it and noticed new entries she hadn't seen before: locations, escape routes, even psychological notes about her. For the first time, she realized she was part of his game, and the only way to survive was to outthink him completely. The killer began striking closer to Claire. Her coworkers were now targets, their homes vandalized, notes left in their mailboxes, claimed soon. The hunter was sending a clear message: you cannot hide. Claire received phone calls in the dead of night. Breathing, whispers, and the faint scratching of a pen on paper, sounds she knew were his signature. Each call revealed he had been inside her apartment, watching, taking notes on her routines. Claire deciphered a chilling pattern. The killer was counting down, each murder part of a ritual that would culminate in her capture. The red ledger wasn't just a record, it was a schedule, a timetable for fear and death. Using the ledger, Claire set a trap of her own. She staged a fake target, leaving behind clues the killer couldn't resist. Everything was ready: motion sensors, escape routes, and backup police units hidden nearby. The killer arrived, notebook in hand, grinning. "You think you can outplay me?" he hissed. Claire stayed calm, baiting him further. The final showdown was imminent. Every move, every breath could be the difference between life and death. The killer stepped into the trap. Claire stayed hidden, heartbeat steady, watching as he followed the staged clues. The police units waited silently, ready to close in. But the killer was clever, pausing, scanning, sensing that something was off. Claire confronted him directly, weapon raised. The killer lunged, fast and unpredictable, but Claire anticipated every move. In the chaos, the red ledger slipped from his hands, pages scattering across the floor. A struggle ensued. Claire forced the killer to the ground, wresting the notebook from him. The police moved in, restraining him. For the first time, his mask of calm shattered, revealing a twisted, manic grin beneath. The killer was taken into custody. The city exhaled. The red ledger, now in evidence, held the names of all he had claimed, and the plans he had meticulously made. Claire realized the horror wasn't just in the killings, but in the meticulous mind that orchestrated them. Months later, Claire still couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Even in jail, the killer smirked through bars, muttering about the next game. The red ledger had ended his spree, but she knew the world contained others like him. And somewhere, another ledger might already be waiting. In the town of Hollow Creek, children had started disappearing. No traces, no struggle, just silence where laughter once echoed. Local legends spoke of the shadow, a creature that lurked in the woods, waiting for moonless nights to strike. 12-year-old Tommy claimed he saw it, a figure taller than a man, all black, with limbs that stretched and bent unnaturally. Its face was featureless except for a mouth that opened impossibly wide, emitting a low, rumbling growl. Most adults dismissed him until he disappeared the next night. Old Man Jenkins, a recluse, warned the townsfolk. It doesn't just take children, it feeds on their fear. The more they scream, the stronger it grows. Few heeded the warning. The nights were quiet until screams erupted from the forest. Trees were clawed, bark shredded, and footprints appeared, impossible in size with toes like talons. Animals refused to enter the forest. Birds fell silent and dogs whimpered. The shadow was patient, waiting for prey to wander too close. A group of teenagers tried to lure the shadow with a noisy bonfire and flashing lights. It appeared towering and silent. Its mouth opened, wider than any human thought possible, but it didn't attack immediately. Instead, it studied them, calculating, waiting for a moment of fear to strike. At night, the shadow roamed the outskirts of Hollow Creek. Its limbs stretched across fences and rooftops, moving silently. Parents reported hearing children calling for help, but the voices were distorted, echoing from the forest. A child vanished from his bedroom window. All that remained was a clawed mark on the sill and a faint smell of sulfur. Neighbors whispered that the shadow didn't need doors. It passed through walls, observing, learning, and choosing its moment. A group of teenagers decided to fight back. They set up tripwires, cameras, and noise traps in the forest. But the shadow was clever. It avoided the traps entirely, moving in ways the human mind couldn't predict. One teen glimpsed its face. The shadow's mouth opened impossibly wide, like a tunnel leading into darkness. From it, muffled whispers of past victims echoed, chilling them to the bone. Fear radiated from the creature. It didn't just hear their terror, it consumed it. The town panicked. No one dared leave their homes after dark. Even a whisper outside a window drew the shadow closer. Its power grew with fear, and each disappearance made it bolder. The woods seemed alive, bending shadows and twisting trees as if the forest itself obeyed the monster. Old Man Jenkins revealed the town's darkest secret. The shadow had been in Hollow Creek for centuries, feeding on children and fear. It was said to be born from a cursed ritual, an ancient pact between humans and darkness. The creature didn't die. It only waited, patient and eternal. The teenagers and a few brave adults decided to fight. They studied the forest, noting patterns in the shadow's movements. They realized it hunted by fear. Calmness, silence, and courage could offer a chance, but terror meant death. They set bait in the forest, a circle of lights, loud noises, and fire. The shadow appeared but didn't take the bait. Instead, it circled them silently, appearing behind one of the teens. Its mouth opened wide, and the shadows reached out like claws. The group ran, splitting up to confuse the monster. The forest twisted unnaturally, paths changing, trees bending. Even when they thought they were safe, muffled cries of other children echoed, making them question reality. The shadow was always just behind, stalking, calculating. One teen, Sophie, stumbled upon the shadow alone. Its featureless face and endless mouth loomed above her. But she forced herself to stay calm, recalling Jenkins' advice. The shadow hesitated, unsure, because fear had no hold over her. This small defiance marked the first glimmer of hope. Sophie reunited with the others. They realized that the only way to defeat the shadow was to remain calm, to deny it the fear it thrived on. Every heartbeat, every trembling thought could feed the monster. The group studied the forest in daylight, marking safe zones and potential traps. They discovered strange carvings in the trees, ancient warnings from previous generations about the shadow's limits. It seemed to avoid areas marked with old symbols, almost as if it feared something. Using the symbols, fire, and mirrors, the group set up a trap to force the shadow into a corner. They carried no weapons that made noise. Every movement was calculated. If the monster sensed fear, the plan would fail. Night fell. The shadow emerged, larger than ever, limbs stretching impossibly. It opened its mouth, revealing a tunnel of darkness filled with whispers of its past victims. The group stood their ground, eyes locked, breathing steady. For the first time, the shadow hesitated. Sophie remembered the carvings. The shadow recoiled at the symbols. Its limbs twitched uncontrollably. The mirrors reflected its own endless mouth back at itself. The monster shrieked, a soundless scream that warped the forest around it. Its power came from fear, but now calmness and reflection weakened it. The group edged closer, leading the shadow into a circle of mirrors and carved symbols. Every step was silent, every breath controlled. The monster's form shuddered as it realized its prey was no longer afraid. The shadow screamed internally, its whispers growing chaotic. The forest around them twisted, shadows elongating like tendrils. But the group remained steady. Each calm heartbeat sapped the monster's strength. From within the darkness, muffled voices of the missing children echoed. The shadow had trapped them in a realm between fear and reality. Sophie and the others shouted to the children, projecting courage and defiance. The voices of the children grew clearer, weakening the shadow further. Sophie grabbed a carved talisman from one of the trees and thrust it toward the shadow. The monster recoiled violently, unable to bear the symbol of its past defeat. Its endless mouth twisted in pain, limbs convulsing, thrashing against the circle of mirrors. The group pressed forward, chanting to maintain calmness and courage. The shadow's form began to dissipate, shadows shrinking, tendrils retracting. The trapped children stumbled free, blinking under the moonlight, alive but terrified. The monster's screams grew silent, its limbs shrinking back into darkness. Every mirror reflected its endless mouth, every symbol sapped its power. It writhed, struggling to maintain form, but fear no longer fueled it. Sophie stepped forward, holding the talisman high. The shadow lunged one last time, but she remained calm. Its massive, featureless face hovered inches from hers, and then it recoiled, as if repelled by her bravery. Slowly, the shadow dissolved into the night air, its whispers fading into nothingness. The forest became still. The trees no longer bent unnaturally, the shadows no longer twisted. Hollow Creek was silent, for the first time in months. The missing children were gathered, crying but alive. Parents embraced them, tears flowing, realizing the nightmare was over. Sophie and her friends were hailed as heroes, their courage the key to survival. Even as the sun rose, Sophie felt a chill. In the deepest shadows of the forest, a faint shimmer remained, like the last breath of the shadow. A whisper drifted on the wind. "I will wait, I will return, for fear never truly dies." Hollow Creek was safe for now. In the small town of Gray Hollow, people whispered about a man who appeared in the fog. He wore a tattered black coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. Those who saw him swore he moved unnaturally, gliding silently, never touching the ground. Ethan, a teenager, first noticed the man near the riverbank. The fog rolled thick, swallowing the trees, and the man pointed at him without speaking. Ethan ran home, heart hammering, only to hear a whisper at his window. Soon after Ethan's encounter, others vanished. Neighbors reported missing family members, friends, and pets. The only evidence was footprints that appeared suddenly and faded into the fog. Residents found strange items left behind. Old clocks stopped at midnight, dried flowers, and notes in shaky handwriting. "He comes for those who wander." The town realized the spooky man was no ordinary figure. He was hunting. Ethan and his friends decided to confront the man. Armed with lanterns and old legends from the town library, They ventured into the foggy woods. As they approached the riverbank, the man stood there, waiting, as if he knew they were coming. The friends moved cautiously, lanterns flickering in the thick fog. Every rustle of leaves sounded amplified. Every snapping twig echoed unnaturally. From the corner of their eyes they glimpsed him, tall, silent, always just at the edge of visibility. Ethan heard a voice, soft and cold, coming from nowhere. "You shouldn't be here." The others froze. The fog seemed to shift around them, forming shapes that weren't quite human. The man's whispers grew louder, feeding their unease. Suddenly, one of Ethan's friends vanished. A scream echoed, then silence. The man had moved impossibly fast, leaving only a shadowy blur in the fog. The friends realized the fog itself was his weapon. He could manipulate it to disorient and trap them. They tried to flee, but the fog twisted the paths, looping them back to the same riverbank. The man appeared at every turn, unaging, silent, with that shadowed face and wide-brimmed hat. Fear gnawed at them. The more panicked they became, the closer he came. Ethan noticed something strange. The man avoided certain symbols carved into trees. Old runes, remnants of forgotten folklore, seemed to repel him slightly. It was a tiny hope, but hope was all they had. Ethan and the others carved symbols into the trees, using the old folklore instructions. They huddled together, hoping the markings would keep the man at bay. For a moment the fog seemed less oppressive, and the whispers receded. The man didn't attack directly. He manipulated the fog, forming shapes of the missing townsfolk to scare them. Screams and cries echoed from nowhere, making the group question their sanity. Every step was a test of courage. Panic would make them easy prey. He appeared suddenly, tall and silent, inches away from Ethan. His face remained shadowed, mouth moving as if whispering words only the fog could carry. Ethan forced himself to remain calm, recalling the symbols carved into the trees. The man recoiled slightly, proving the legends were true. The friends mapped safe zones marked by the symbols. They realized the man was bound to the fog. It was both his weapon and his prison. By moving strategically, they could avoid his direct line of influence. Ethan and his friends led the man toward the clearing. The fog thickened, swirling unnaturally, obscuring their path. From within the mist, shadowy forms emerged, twisted reflections of themselves, designed to terrify and confuse. The man manipulated the fog with terrifying precision. Branches snapped, whispers echoed, and the shadows lunged at them. Panic was deadly. One wrong move would feed his power. The friends reminded each other to stay calm. Every heartbeat and breath counted. Fear was a weapon in the man's hands. They focused on the symbols etched in the ground, feeling the faint protective hum of old magic. The man recoiled as they crossed a line of symbols. The fog around him thinned, revealing glimpses of his true form: elongated limbs, featureless face, and a mouth that opened impossibly wide. He was less a man than a shadow given shape. Ethan lit small fires along the outer edge of the symbols. The man advanced cautiously, wary of the glowing lines. They had him exactly where they wanted, trapped in a circle of protection with no way to retreat. The man stepped into the circle of symbols and fire. His limbs twitched unnaturally, mouth opening and closing as if screaming silently. The fog around him thinned, unable to penetrate the protective barrier. He attempted to manipulate their minds through whispers carried on the fog. Visions of loved ones screaming, shadows lunging, they tested their resolve. Ethan and his friends remained calm, repeating protective chants from the old texts. The man struck the ground, sending waves of mist outward. The fog warped violently, trying to extinguish the fires and break the circle. Branches snapped toward them, but the symbols held firm, glowing faintly with protective energy. The man screamed, silent to the ears but deafening in the mind. He recoiled from the fire and symbols, twisting and contorting as if in pain. The friends pressed closer, carefully maintaining the circle, their courage burning brighter than his fear-fueled power. Ethan grabbed the largest talisman from the ground and thrust it toward the man. The shadow recoiled violently, limbs flailing, mouth stretching wider than ever. With a final, silent scream, the fog began to collapse around him, drawing the man back into its own emptiness. The man writhed as the fog consumed him. His form twisted, limbs snapping back into shadows, mouth closing and features vanishing. The protective symbols and fire held strong, preventing him from escaping. The fog thinned completely. The woods grew quiet. Birds began to sing again, and the chilling whispers faded. Gray Hollow exhaled as the oppressive presence lifted. The missing townsfolk, trapped by the fog's illusions, stumbled out of the trees. Families reunited, crying, relieved, and exhausted. Ethan and his friends were hailed as heroes. They had faced fear itself and survived. Even as the sun rose, Ethan felt unease. In the distant fog on the horizon, a faint silhouette remained, barely visible, a whisper of darkness. It seemed smaller, weaker, but it had not entirely vanished. The old legends proved true. The man in the fog could be contained, but not destroyed. Ethan etched protective symbols around the town and lit fires along the forest edge. And in the wind, a faint whisper floated. "I will return when fear grows again." Gray Hollow was safe for now.